My mama was locked up, my daddy, my brothers, my cousin, everybody.
There are 2.3 million people locked up in the United States.
I spent more time in prison than I've been in society. That's a shame.
Around half for non-violent crimes.
I shouldn't be in here. I'm in here basically for skipping school.
These inmates are costing states billions they can't afford.
Our number one frequent flyer is not dangerous, but we have probably spent millions of dollars on this guy.
Frontline takes you inside one American neighborhood where getting locked up is a part of everyday life.
The system's set up for them to fail because when they come out of prison, there's nothing for them.
And inside one state that is trying to fix a broken system.
Incarceration has become the response to every social problem that we encounter.
Jail doesn't work. Prison doesn't work.
We need to distinguish between who we're mad at and who we're afraid of.
Prison State.
Released today, and it deserves our undivided attention. 1 out of every 100 Americans is now behind bars, locked up in prison or in jail.
Think of prisons, if we bother to think of them at all, that is, there is a tendency to see them as institutions completely divorced from human society.
The first practical use of it was really in the United States, in Philadelphia, try to provide positive change and change someone's behavior, but it was partly as a movement to get away from corporal and capital punishment, to come up with something better. The problem, and the thing that people forgot, was going into a monastery voluntarily and isolating yourself in order to pray and think is very different than being pushed into a cell by the state. One of the things that seems to be true in the history of prison systems is that the philosophies change, but the buildings remain. So you have these massive buildings that are these major expenditures, and very often just used as essentially human warehouses. You would occasionally get people that would try different kinds of experiments in education and therapeutics in some way, in inmate self-government, but usually they were fairly quickly overwhelmed by the crowding in the system, or because they were politically unpopular.
From 1920 until 1970, this whole half century of American history, the rate of incarceration was roughly level at about 110 per 100,000. And this is a broad span of our history. This is, the Roaring 20s and Prohibition, the Depression and all the social change there, World War II, the post-war economic boom, the 50s, the explosion of suburbia, the 60s and all the social turbulence. During this whole period, the rate of incarceration is roughly level in the United States at about 110 per 100,000. And this reflects, the policies of police departments and prosecutors and judges operating all over the country, in local and state level. And then in 1970, this all changes. So that by now, the rate of incarceration nationwide is over 700 per 100,000. The rate of incarceration for African Americans is over 4,000 per 100,000. And so you have to wonder, what changed? Why did this half century of stability get upended with this dramatic increase in incarceration in the United States?
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
Once the federal government decided that we were going to have a war on drugs, they were able to then take a lot of money from the federal budget and then send it out to states and localities.
I realize the need for money to deal with this problem. I am glad that in this administration we have increased the amount of money for handling the problem of dangerous drugs sevenfold. It will be $600 million this year. More money will be needed in the future.
First, I am recommending legislation making the penalty for all illegal trafficking in hard drugs a life sentence in prison.
Issued before the U.S. Supreme Court today, mandatory life sentences for possession of large quantities of drugs. That is the law in Michigan.
California Governor Pete Wilson signed that state's new 3 strikes and you're out law. It requires a sentence of life in prison without parole for at least 25 years for anyone convicted of
of a third violent felony.
Most of
the direction to a judge to sentence can be done in two ways. You can say, Judge, here's a crime, and for this crime, you can impose a sentence anywhere in this range from probation to some term of years imprisonment. The other way is to say, Judge, you must impose some minimum number of years or months of imprisonment and go up from there. So a mandatory minimum is a sentence where no matter how minor the role of the offender, no matter how insignificant a violation of this crime it is, a minimum term must be imposed.
To my melanated family and spiritually conscious brothers and sisters around the world, I am Brother Tommy, and it's time to get it in. One love, family. This video we are going to discuss the land of the unfree and the home of the bravely incarcerated. In this country, they consistently talk about how free everyone is and how it is a free country. So we are going to take a deeper dive into the videos we just seen. Is this just happening, or is it all planned? So that is what we're going to discuss and what we're going to bring to light. They want to make it appear like it's a war on drugs, it's a war on this, it's a war on that. No, it is literally a plan that is being played out to take away the freedoms of the average citizen in this country. And even if you don't commit a crime, they're still doing the same thing to you as well, limiting your ability to live in a free manner. And we're going to get deeply into that. So one thing that we're going to discuss is how the freedoms that America is supposed to represent are just eroding on a day-to-day basis. So Thomas Jefferson cautioned us that freedom is not free. The price you must pay for freedom is eternal vigilance. As a people, we have for many years been apathetic to the Congress, the president, and the judiciary. So much so that we've never noticed the subtle, diminishing changes that were occurring to our freedom right in plain sight. So the American people have not been vigilant, and specifically my melanated brothers and sisters have not been vigilant. Because somewhere along the line, the white supremacist plan for this republic was flipped into something totally different, which we see now it's a incarceration state. So without any constitutional authority, the republic was transformed into a democracy. So we need to ask the question, how did that occur? Now that we are a democracy, the president makes law by executive order. Again, without constitutional authority. The Congress is powerless because of fierce partisanship and the constant pursuit of money from the international corporations and the needed that these politicians need to perpetuate their political lives. Look at all the things that they're talking about with Hunter Biden. Look at how Barack Obama, all the different presidents are enriched, and different people who go into Congress and the Senate are enriched. That's because, you know, they're working behind the scenes. So the result basically is that they do nothing for the checks and balances of the government. And so it allows the other branches to be runaway de facto branches of the government, basically doing whatever that they want to do. So the agencies that were created by Congress to make and enforce regulations and administer certain draconian laws of the Congress and the executive branch now answer only to basically diseased minds, corrupted bodies of the executive branch, which answer to no one but the international cartel of bankers, the banking cartels, major philanthropists like Bill Gates and others, and senior level policy banks. And if you think your government isn't beholden to international cartels or to philanthropists, look at Bill Gates. How is he able to tell the American people what they're going to do during the pandemic? But obviously the government is beholden to him in some way. So these incomparable laws of Congress, especially The taxing statutes are basically unconstitutional in their application to the citizens of the 50 states. But the seizure of the productive people's wealth for the benefit of the non-producing minority and the imprisonment of those who resist this theft has been ratified by a corrupted federal judiciary and Supreme Court. They're going along with it, family. You know, and that this basically briefly just sums up the present day democracy in the state of this union. You have elected officials that are not there working on the best interests of the so-called public, and they're turning everything you do into a crime. So as a nation, this country has more citizens in prison than any country in the world. Over 2 million, and 90% of the crimes from which they are accused are victimless crimes. Brother smoking a joint, walking down the street, hanging out, having a beer with your homeboy, talking. They don't turn that into loitering. Just, turning everything totally victimless crime, things that aren't crimes in the first place. So, and mostly the law that they violated is most likely was paid for by some corporation to protect them from us. So, but we, however, are the problem because, we operate, like that new tool the king has, and we do his bidding without questioning whether the law is a good law or a bad law. It is our responsibilities as citizens, jurors, or whatever to ask the questions. But what we have left is for the prosecutor and the judge to tell us what the law means instead of using the great creator's gift of intelligence to discern certain things for ourselves. That's why the majority of people don't know anything about law. They don't teach you anything about law coming out of formal schooling because they don't want you to be uninformed. So what the people don't know is we are responsible for determining not only the facts, but also the law. If that were not true, then we would still have legal slavery and still be prosecuting people for helping slaves escape under the Fugitive Slave Act, because that law was interpreted and upheld by the courts at the time. So, now what we have to understand is we have replaced morality with abortion on demand. And if we don't kill our children in the womb, we tax them to death the moment they are born. So does it not seem immoral to permit a Congress to spend money that it does not have so that every future generation will be obligated to pay from their labor or property for their entire life on a debt that existed 60 or 80 years ago? These are the entrapments that this government is bringing about, because people are unaware that the moment your child is born, that the debt to the Federal Reserve Bank of $22,000 is attached to that child and rising. And not only is it's not only immoral, it is the thing that causes eventually a society to basically erupt. Once they understand what's really going on, eventually something's going to have to give. So what we have to understand is they're currently doing things out of the Constitution. The Constitution has very limited powers that it gives to the government in it. And this government has gone way past that. And so we're going to talk about a few of those now. So in 1798, Thomas Jefferson wrote that Congress has not unlimited power to provide for the general welfare, but only those specifically enumerated in the Constitution. And also Wilson Nicholas, who was a delegate to the Virginia Convention that ratified the Constitution, said Congress has power to define and punish for counterfeiting and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations, but they cannot define or prescribe the punishment for other crimes whatsoever without violating the Constitution. So why do we have laws like vagrancy laws of jaywalking or spitting on the sidewalk? Because the Constitution doesn't give them a right to put forth these type of laws. But here we have all these laws that people are violating on a daily basis and going to prison and jail for. And in addition, Chief Justice Marshall said that the police power unquestionably remains and ought to remain with the states. Until this past century, pretty much all federal courts upheld the view that the federal government could deal only with crimes specifically mentioned in the Constitution. But that's not what they're doing. Let me tell you what the Supreme Court said in 1911. It said, among the powers of the state not surrendered, which powers therefore remain with the state, is the power so to regulate the relative rights and duties of all within its jurisdiction as to guard the public morals, the public safety, and the public health, as well as promote the public convenience and the common good. So they're telling you at that point that the states had the power. So how did the federal government, the Congress, and now start making all these laws, all these legislations, and all these rules when the state, in the beginning, is who had the power? So when this so-called republic was founded, let me tell you how they're moving on the people so heavily without people knowing. So when this republic was founded, there were only 4 federal crimes. Let me say it again. 4 federal crimes. That's it. Treason, counterfeiting, piracy, and crimes against the laws of nations. Now, family, there are 3,000 federal crimes, 300,000 federal administrative regulations, many which are punishable as crimes, and there's about 85,000 local governments with 513,000 elected officials. Come on, family. So there is an estimated 45 million laws, state, federal, and local. And let's just look at it this way from a spiritual standpoint. The great creator of the universe gave us only 10 laws which to live our lives, called the 10 Commandments. It would be impossible for us to obey 45 million laws. Thus, so many people going to jail, incarceration state, fines, tickets, people going in and out of jail. That's what they want. That's what they're setting up. They're setting up a society that moves in that manner. All crimes are commercials. So when you're looking at those millions of laws, and you talking about these government enforcers out here, these police officers that are on code doing anything that the state says do or the federal government says do, they're destroying the so-called land of the free. So in 1900, family, 1 in every $15 went for government use. In the year 2020, nearly 1 in every $2 went for government use. So not only are they expanding the police state, they're taking every dollar from you and using it for whatever that they choose, extravagant lifestyles, enriching their families, inheritance, prosperity for them. They're taking it from you. So we must contend with 65 times more laws than our grandfathers did at the turn of the 20th century. And everybody knows this, that April 15th date, the most cruel and unjust of those being the tax laws. So the old axiom that truth is the first casualty of war is as close to any truth that you will ever find in your investigation of a federal government. That's why they say when you colonize a people, you also colonize their information. That way they don't know from which they come. So with this being understood, we have to know that our government has lied to us, and we have been at war with our national government for a very long time. And we have to understand there's 2 facets going on here. There's what these white folks believe who come in as immigrants in terms of, oh, we built this great nation for ourselves. And it's something different when it comes to the indigenous melanated people of the land. I'm speaking to the melanated indigenous people of the land, but they've duped the white folks as well without them knowing. So we have to understand that since 1933, remember the United States filed bankruptcy in 1933 as well. That was your Great Depression. A concentrated effort has been made to impoverish the people of America, especially the indigenous people. Our wealth has been systematically stripped from us by taxation and outright theft in the form of usury, also known as interest, and fractional reserve banking policy ever since the Federal Reserve stepped into play. So federal agencies publish an average of over 200 pages of new rulings, regulations, and proposals in the Federal Register each business day. The expansion of the federal code is one of the most obvious measures of the increase of the administrative control over the citizens. That's how they're controlling everybody, by administrative federal codes. The politicians' effort to socially engineer society by an endless multiplication of penalties, prohibitions, taxes, and prison sentences is what is causing all the problem. Prohibition. You can't drink this. You can't smoke that. What gives them the right? So you're basically looking at an attack on the individual's right, where it has reached a point in our lives where a citizen has no right to use of his own land if the bureaucracy determines it to be a wetland, or no right to money in his pocket or his bank account if the IRS determines he has taxes owed. No right to his property if a duck flying south for the winter lands in a puddle in his backyard. A man's home is supposed to be his castle, except when a politician wants the land, the house is built on for a low-cost housing project. That's how they work. You think you have these freedoms and own these things until they legislatively take them away from you. So into America today, a citizen's use of his own property is presumed illegal until approved by multiple zoning and planning commissions. Me and my dad go fishing a lot. We were sitting there fishing the other day, asking each other, hey, you got your license? Can't even go fishing without a license. They'll tell you it's for the good of the lake and they're doing all these wonderful things. No, it's more control, family. Also, since 1985, federal, state, and local governments have seized the property of over 200,000 Americans under asset forfeiture laws, often with no more evidence of wrongdoing than an unsubstantiated assertion made by an anonymous government informant. The government officials now exert vast arbitrary power over citizens' daily lives, from Equal Employment Opportunity Commission bureaucrats that can levy a $145,000 fine on a St. Louis small businessman because he did not have 8.5 minorities on his payroll, or to the Minnesota or Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, which regulate property so that you may not use the lake or swamp contained on your land because an endangered mouse species lives nearby. This is the type of things and level of control they have, family. Basically, federal agricultural bureaucrats can prohibit, say specifically in Arizona, farmers from selling 58% of their fresh lemons to other Americans. They have custom and service inspectors can destroy import shipments without compensating the owners. Federal bank regulators, they can are officially empowered to seize assets of any citizen for allegedly violating written or unwritten banking regulations. Government agencies, man, they just out of control. The Supreme Court, who is supposed to be the protector of your Bill of Rights, has ratified power of these federal employees, giving them the power to basically ransack you and dog you. They just asserted a de facto right to search anybody, anytime, on the pretext of terrorism. So now the average American has no freedom from having government agents strip search their children, rummage through his luggage. They can kick in your door, ransack your house, sift through your bank records, and trespass in your fields. So today, a citizen's constitutional right to privacy can be null and void by the sniff of a dog. If a dog walks by your car and smells marijuana, which is naturally given to the earth by the great creator, they can do all these things to you. So they're making it seem like, oh, they're going after crime or they're trying to stop drugs. No. From a government level down, they're putting the clamp on the people so that what they can do in their personal lives are minimized. And there is no mistake about it. Family, I appreciate you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.